Instant reaction. Iowa's hopes of an NCAA tournament bid fall by the wayside as they're blown out by Ohio State. What's next for Iowa basketball? Look back. We break it all down today. Locked on Hawkeyes.
You are Locked on Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked on Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked on Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today. You'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, as we prepare for the NCAA tournament, March Madness, the upcoming weekend, just wall-to-wall basketball here over the next 3 days, the excitement level certainly is palpable if you're a college basketball fan. But if you're here, you're a fan of the Iowa Hawkeyes, and this one was dreadful. Just a pitiful performance overall, and really a microcosm of the Fran McCaffery era and what we've grown accustomed to when the calendar flips into March. For the second consecutive year, Iowa is ousted by Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament for the second consecutive year, doing it as a better seed. Now, this one, Iowa was a slight underdog, but certainly looked like they were no match for this Ohio State team. The Buckeyes have won 5 out of their last 6. They'll get their opportunity against Illinois with the win. Ohio State likely will be in the NCAA tournament, maybe staying in their home state and getting shipped off to Dayton. But that aside, we don't give a crap about the Buckeyes. What we're here is to talk about the Hawkeyes, and that performance was ugly. 90 points allowed against Ohio State, 47 in the second half. Battle, you did a great job of him. Jamison Battle in the first half. There's 2 halves of a game. Open shots all over the place. It was, again, the defensive issues that continue to crop up for this Iowa basketball team, and that's the storyline. I mean, we can go through and we can talk about the performances that we saw offensively. Ben Krikke played better, at least on the offensive end of the floor. Peyton Sandford did what he had to and just trying to gut his way to a team, to get this team to a victory. They just don't have enough. Perkins struggled once again, though he had 7 assists. He had 6 turnovers in the game, wasn't able to knock down shots. Josh Dix had an opportunity in the second half, wide open 3-pointer, could have cut it to 5, clangs off. Ohio State comes down, gets a bucket, it's 10, and it's over at that point. And we'll get into some more of the big picture stuff here, but you look at these final 2 games, and he lost to 2 teams playing well. Both Illinois and Ohio State, they're playing good basketball. So you don't want to get too crazy of overstating what it was. But we also have to live in reality. And at 18-14 this year, Fran McCaffery, just to get them to the point, I think you do have to give them credit. A lot of young guys mixing the veterans with the young and did an okay job of getting to the bubble. But boy, just overall, the frustration of getting there to getting to this opportunity and just not showing up. We're getting blown out early in the game and just giving up those wide open 3-pointers. Ohio State goes 11 of 20 from the 3-point line. You're not chasing them off. 1.23 points per possession for the Buckeyes. And it wasn't just, a guy or two that got hot. It was everybody. I mean, look at the bench scoring that they had. We mentioned Battle struggle in the first half, but 8 points from Royal. Middleton, he's hitting shots all over the place. He finishes with 11. 7 from Bonner. Key had 8 coming off the bench and using that big body and doing his thing. Chapman even knocked down a 3-pointer. I mean, it was everybody. And Iowa just was not able to keep up with them. Josh Dix, opportunity there. You just need him to continue to be more aggressive and kind of what he's going to be going forward. Peyton Sandford, we anticipate, is probably going to go through the draft process, put his name in there, at least get some feedback from the NBA about what it's going to be. We know his limitations physically. He's not an elite athlete by any means. A good rebounder, obviously a good shooter, one of the quickest releases that you're going to find, but a foot speed, those kind of things, I think are going to be one of the major elements you're going to be looking at for Sandford if he decides to come back for another year. Owen Freeman, it was an uneven performance out of him, had an open 3 early in the game, did knock it down. That's one thing for Owen Freeman going into the offseason. He's going to have to continue to expand his game and certainly figuring out what they're going to do inside and kind of the future of that middle position, the 4 and 5 positions. What do? Who do you pair Owen Freeman with? Do you go out and you get a traditional big and play him at the power forward position? Is he your center? and you go with the power, maybe even a stretch kind of guy, somebody like a Cooper Koch, you go that direction? Or is it Laje Dembele and the continued improvement that we hope we're going to see with that great raw power that he has and the strength that he has and those kind of things, you to go that direction? Chris Taggio coming in next season. We'll talk about that a little bit more here, but to the here now. So NCAA tournament obviously is off the table. I mean, it's just not happening. At 18 and 14 with a net in the 60s, they're not going to get there. I mean, there's no reason at all for you to cling to any kind of hope that the committee is going to do them a solid and put them in. They don't have the resume. They just don't. 3 quad 1 victories, overall record against quad 1 and quad 2 in comparison to the rest of the bubble teams isn't there. Plus, there's going to be bid thieves. Dayton gets beat in the A10 tournament. There'll be somebody else that's going to win the A10. Dayton's going to be in the NCAA tournament. There's going to be other those factors that are going to continue to go on. There's going to be other teams that are able to play themselves in, including Ohio State. It's just not going to happen. So you get the NIT. Now, we have still not heard definitively if I was going to get a home game. They were scheduled to get a home game, and the new structure of the NIT, the power conferences, the Power 5 for football, plus the Big East, the top 2 teams from each of those leagues that don't qualify for the NCAA tournament in terms of net, they will be automatic bids in there, not just automatic bids to get in. They also will have the opportunity to host a first-round game. And because of that, Iowa absolutely would be able to host. Here's the problem. Carver Hawkeye Arena is going to be used by the women's tournament. We know the first and second round is there. Not only that, the other component is in the women's tournament, the play-in games, the men's side, we see those games played in Dayton. That's not the case in the women's tournament. So if you're the 11 seeds trying to play your way into the field of 64, if you will, win that opening round, the first 4 game, to do that, you do it on the court that you will eventually play the upcoming 6 seed. You're going to be shipped to that. So there's not a neutral site environment for that. That means if Iowa has 2 16 seeds playing off to get into the main 64 team bracket, in order to do that, they will be playing then either Wednesday or Thursday. That means availability for Carver. That means a quick turnaround. And because of that, even with a Tuesday game for Iowa in the NIT, I'm just not sure if the NCAA is willing to be able to give Iowa the opportunity to host that game. Will they get there? Should they? Yes. The bracket will say that they should be able to host. Now, are they going to provide some wiggle room? We talked about back in the 90s when they hosted the game in the Mark. Did they put a game back here in Des Moines as they had the neutral court game earlier this season against Florida A&M? Or did they do something similar to that? Those are possibilities. They could absolutely try to do that. I just don't know the willingness, and we certainly haven't heard anything definitive on that front that I was going to be able to do that. It'll be the NIT. Will it be a home NIT game? We'll see. Speaking of Dayton, there's a great game. NIT, you know, the NIT crowds have been a little bit different. Takes a while to build the momentum. You remember the year early in the Fran tenure that they made the run all the way to the championship game, eventually got beat by Baylor in the NIT. It can create some excitement with a young team. I mean, it's something to build on and kind of maybe get the bad taste of your last home game out of your mouth against Illinois, but it's not what you want to be. We're going to talk big picture. Fran McCaffrey, this squad will miss the NCAA tournament for the first time in 5 seasons. What does that mean going forward for Iowa? Is Fran going to be part of it? Firing? I don't think so. But there's a lot of people that disagree and certainly want to see this to be the end of the days for Fran McCaffrey. We'll tackle that as we continue here. An instant reaction after Iowa falls in the Big Ten tournament to Ohio State. Big questions, big answers come your way next. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now, some legal information. Claim as Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is also brought to you by Fire TV. Hey, you're looking for something, maybe cutting some corners and trying to find a way to save a little bit of money? How about getting a Fire TV stick? Fire TV is your destination for sports, live games, highlights, in-depth analysis, and Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as that Fire TV stick. You just plug it in to your existing TV, and it's going to provide access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball, college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels, deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all from free. Keep up to date in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and a whole lot more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, and a whole lot more. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, well, you should. Trust me on this one. Learn more. Visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. That's Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Trent kind of back with you once again on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. All right, let's get into it and talk about the future. I know there's many people out there that want to see Fran McCaffrey gone. I get it. The lack of success in March has soured the fan base. And you look at the attendance figures this year, they're down. And you can say this is a nationwide phenomenon, and it is. Attendance across college basketball on the men's side has been down and has been trending downwards for a number of years now. However, we don't care about the rest of the country. We care about Iowa, and that's what we're here to talk about. And you see those numbers. Back in the day, it was different. I understand that things evolve. They change. And I can't just be old guy here on a podcast complaining about the good old days and the way that it once was, because we're not there anymore. We're in the present. And because of that, you have to look at the way this fan base has checked out of Fran McCaffrey. I don't believe that the next coach will be more successful than Fran McCaffrey. The consistent nature that he has built this program into. 5 straight NCAA tournaments. 5 straight. That's something that hasn't happened in Iowa basketball in a really long time. Certainly not in my lifetime, that we've had 5 consecutive NCAA tournaments by one coach. George Raveling wasn't able to do it. Well, he's only here 3 years. Dr. Tom wasn't able to do it. Lute Olson, different environment. I get that. But we're here today. Alford, no. Licklider, obviously not. And as we sit here today, can Iowa get to the next level? Can they break through? We are talking about such a small sample size. And that's part of the frustration. When you look at Fran McCaffrey and what he has done, making them a consistent winner in the Big Ten, finishing in the top half of the league 10 of the last 11 years. That's incredible. That kind of consistency year in and year out, we know that at minimum, we're going to have a competent basketball team. That's not the case across the country. Now look at Michigan, who has a whole lot more advantages than Iowa basketball does. And what happened to them? 23 losses this season. Illinois themselves hasn't made a Sweet 16 since 2004. I mean, you look around your brethren in the Big Ten and you see some collapses, and you do not see the consistent nature that Iowa basketball is. But people, they just want to get to that second weekend. 26 years without a run into the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. It has soured most everybody and frustrated most everybody that they just can't get through. There's been opportunities. You go back, we talked about the game 5 years ago against Tennessee in the round of 32, down 18. They come back, force overtime in that one. If they win that game, is the fan base suddenly all in on Fran? No, it's not as simple as that. I mean, there are so many layers to the story. For some people, it's the sideline theatrics. People don't like that. I'm fine with it. It doesn't bother me. When he goes overboard, there's usually a reason for it. I think that he could have a little bit more decorum and not go from 0 to 100 so quickly. And I think that's some of the reason that we see some of the technical fouls. But, I mean, we're talking about such a small, minute part of it. It's just a little thing. But for some people, it's the biggest thing. Getting the second weekend, I don't think that's enough. I don't think if all of a sudden they would have made the Sweet 16 5 years ago, that people would say, well, yep, he's just got a lifetime contract. No, we're not going that direction either. You look at the future, and that's where we go to next, the future. 2 incoming freshmen next year, Cooper Koch, a stretch 4, can really fill it up from the outside. One of the better shooters in the class of 2024. He's a top 100 kid. Obviously, J.R. Koch is his dad. You got the Iowa connections there, and that's something that's worked pretty well for Iowa in the past. You're excited about him. Chris Taggio comes in, and Taggio is kind of the great unknown. One of the recruiting services on 3 has him as a top 40 player in the country. Another one over at Scout, and they have him more fringe top 100 type of player. So kind of The recruiting services are all over the place with him. What he is an elite rebounder, a great defender. And that's what Iowa needs. Iowa needs to be better on the defensive end. And if Fran McCaffrey decides he wants to stick around, he's going to see this thing out and he's going to continue. And he has earned that. He has absolutely earned that. I know the detractors. It's all about winning a game in the round of 32. I don't believe that would be enough to quell all the angst against Fran McCaffrey, but that's at least the talking point that a lot of people get to. But if Fran runs it back, and you don't fire a coach at this point in his career, missing the tournament for the first time in 5 seasons, you don't fire a coach after that. Not at Iowa. We're not Duke. We're not Kentucky. We're not Indiana, Purdue. We're not Ohio State. We're not Michigan. We're none of those programs. This is a top 30 type of program. Took forever to get a practice facility, a recruiting base that's not huge, an NIL budget on the basketball front that is certainly struggling behind not just many of your brethren in the Big Ten and the major conferences, but you look at a conference like the Big East, where they don't have football at a major conference level. And because of that, Creighton, they can spend out of their ass on basketball, and they do. And it helps in a big-time way. Providence, they can do that. Places like that absolutely can spend at a level that Iowa just isn't right now because of the investment that is being made into the football program. So Iowa's lagging behind. Need to figure out the roster, what it's going to look like, and what it's going to be going forward. I believe Fran McCaffrey has earned that. I get the frustration. I was as frustrated as you were. I was absolutely pissed off at the game. Watching it, I understand how upset you can be. Because for me, Iowa basketball makes me more upset than any other sporting event. Hawkeye football, I don't get this upset. I don't get this upset about my Twins or the Bears or any other team that I root for. It is about Iowa basketball. The highs and lows that I have throughout the course of a game and throughout the course of a season are higher than this, than any other sport. I care so deeply about Iowa basketball, and I want them to be more relevant. I want them to make the next step. I just don't know if Iowa can make the right hire to get them to a level better than this. Could they hire a coach that gets them to a Sweet 16? Sure. Again, we're talking about a 2-game sample size. You get in, right draw, upset happens. It can happen to anybody. But it's much deeper than just that. Fran has this at a program. He took this team. You remember how awful this team looked back in December? They were brutal. Just an awful basketball team. And he got them on the bubble. That's a good coaching job. Last 2 games, not so good. Guys are getting shots. They're missing shots. The defensive end's not there. And as we continue, that's what we're going to talk about on the defensive side and what this roster is going to look like. What do they need to do? Fran comes back. If he does, what is this going to look like next season? As don't put a cap on the season. There's still the NIT, but we put an end on the regular season for Iowa basketball. We continue here. Locked On Hawkeyes. Stay right there. We're back with more in a moment. This week's March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed a little further than the rest. Just like all the new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The Tennessee Volunteers can only be described as a Pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have created a lane for themselves after claiming the top spot in the SEC. Player of the Year candidate Dalton Neck has carried the Vols all season long and made them a team to watch in March. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. That's NissanUSA.com. Trent Conner back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. What's the future look like here for Iowa basketball? We're excited about the recruiting class. We talked about Cooper Koch and Chris Taggio coming in, couple of forwards, power forward types. That's going to be a help. Absolutely. Koch, an ability to shoot the basketball. Iowa needs more three-point shooting. We've seen that throughout the course of the season. Iowa this year, which is crazy to think of the way they're built offensively and just how good they are on the offensive end of the floor. This season, 141st in the country in three-point shooting, 34.7%. With the way Iowa's built, that needs to be better. No doubt about it. They finished the year 16th in the country in offensive efficiency. Doing it with this squad, that is a high water mark. We have Peyton Sanford likely coming back. We talked about him probably going through the draft process, likely will be back for his senior season. Ben Krikke is gone. Owen Freeman back for a sophomore year. Brock Harding the same. You bring in, of course, back Laje DeBelle and Bryce Sanford out of that freshman class. Josh Dix, we saw the ascension this season. Shoots 43% from behind the arc. The aggressiveness needs to continue to grow from him. He's got a lot of things, though, offensively. You get really excited about his future and has been, at minimum, an adequate on-ball defender. Patrick McCaffrey is going to be moving on, where that is, either trying to play professionally overseas or using his final season somewhere else. As we talked about the crazy rumor of him going to Duke a couple of days ago, wherever it may be, I think we all know feels like it's over in Iowa City for Patrick McCaffrey. The great unknown is Tony Perkins and what he's going to decide to do. And brought this up yesterday on my radio show. Tony Perkins has always played with the chip on his shoulder. He has always been a guy that used the lack of recruiting value that people saw in him within in-state schools with Purdue and Indiana, and he's used that and motivated him. He turned himself into a really good Big Ten player. Not elite, but a very good Big Ten player. And if he wants to come back for another season and it makes sense for Iowa financially and NIL, I think you do that. You take back a veteran guard like him. So what else needs to be done? Now, if Tony Perkins doesn't come back, are he handed the keys off to Brock Harding? Is he going to be your starting point guard? You're going to say, we're going to go with Harding in the backcourt along with Dix and Sanford, and we're going to go that direction. I'd be okay with it. I would love to see what he can do. I don't think he's quite there. And there's going to be certain matchups defensively that he's going to struggle. Here's the thing. Iowa struggles anyway defensively. They're going to be bad on that end one way or the other. So if you have a guy that has some physical limitations because of his size and because of his lack of just strength, then okay, you go with it. But the improvements that we saw throughout the course of the year from him, one of the few bright spots these last two games was Brock Harding. Got to be better with the point guard, with his quicks, his ability off the bounce. What a good facilitator he is. I think it'd be fun to watch him. Jordan Bohanna was not a true point guard, if you will. He didn't have that same kind of quickness that you look for in a traditional point guard. Same thing with Mike Cassell. Good defender, couldn't shoot it. And there's knocks I know against Brock Harding. I would like to see. Now, is there a bridge guy out there? If Perkins decides not to come back for his final season, is there a point guard that can bridge the gap? And then all of a sudden you have Harding as the backup, a starter, a fifth-year guy that comes in that is your more traditional point guard and go that direction. I'd be fine with that. But finally, the biggest thing is you have to find a way to be better defensively. So Iowa finishes this year 155th in the country in defensive efficiency. And that's just not because of the pace that Iowa plays at. Look, I was going to give up more points than other teams because they play one of the fastest tempos in the country, 23rd in the country this year in adjusted tempo. That means that, yes, they're going to play fast. And when you play fast, you're going to give up points. But here's what Iowa's been defensively going back throughout the last, 8-9 years of Fran McCaffrey's tenure. 155th this past season, 168 last year, 2022, 80th, 75th in 2021, 97th in 2020, 111th, 242 in that dreadful year of 2018, and 123 in 2017. Now, when he had Adam Woodbury and Mike Cassell and Zach Clemens, those three guys, all plus defenders, they were pretty good on the defensive end. But that was just having the right pieces. That was a long time ago. We're talking about going back almost a decade from the last time they were able to have that. That's where we are. You have to find a way to be better defensively. I've brought it up a ton of times. I'm probably sure you're sick of hearing it. What John Beilein did going out and getting a dedicated coach, going out and finding a dedicated coach to help out on the defensive end. Michigan was like Iowa. A good program. A guy that they'd win a game in the tournament. Maybe even they could get Sweet 16. A tick better than Iowa, but still about the same kind of playing. Instead, he goes out and hires Luke Yaklich to be his defensive coordinator. That's basically what he was. Guess what? They went to the national championship game a year later. Their program ascended by doing that. Now, Fran's a control freak. I mean, Fran, it is his way or the highway. And that's what's difficult to see is him actually willing to do that. I would love to see it. By the way, Luke Yaklich, who did that at Michigan, he's out of a job. Didn't work as a head coach at UIC. Not an easy place to play. Obviously, UIC also transitioning and building in as they made the leap up to the Missouri Valley Conference coming from the Horizon League. And that's a big step up in class. And they weren't able to answer the challenge. He's out of work. Could you make the call? Fran, please? Because what you're doing defensively isn't working. It just isn't. And we see it year after year, time after time. It's not working. It's not just because physically there are guys that just have some limitations on that end. It's not just that. What's the scheme? What are you trying to do? What is your defensive philosophy? And we talked about this a lot on the football side of things and trying to understand what the philosophy was on the offensive side of the football over the last 3 years. It was hard to describe. What does Iowa try to do on the defensive end of the floor? Because what they're doing leads to wide open threes, teams getting out in transition, getting pretty much whatever they want. There has to be a change. And with the change, I think this thing can work. We're out of here. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the final games of the Big Ten tournament, the big selection show. We'll be back with you on Sunday evening into Monday morning with a instant reaction bracket breakdown, as we will have the bracket in front of us for the men's NIT, and we'll find out if Iowa will get one of those home games depending on the availability of Carver Hawkeye Arena. Again, likely if it is going to happen, it's going to have to be early, probably a Tuesday game for the Hawkeye men hosting in the NIT. And of course, we'll have the big bracket on the women's side of things. Iowa, a likely number 1 seed. What's the path going to look like? We'll break it all down on Monday. Have a great weekend. Thanks as always for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Speaking of the brackets, our bracket breakdown show here on Locked On's coming up on Monday morning at 6 a.m. Central Time with Andy Patton and Isaac Shoddy. They're going to be breaking it down on the Locked On College Basketball podcast feed Monday morning. That will be there for you, for all you bracket heads, helping you out set your brackets for the NCAA tournament. We'll talk to you again on Monday. Have a great weekend, and go Hawks.